These days, Škoda is best known for its hatchbacks and crossovers, but the company has actually been building trucks and full-size buses since the 1930s. Still, there's one vehicle in Škoda's history that stands out, a real oddball. The Škoda 1203 was the brand's one and only van. They never made one before, and they haven't made one since. What's even more surprising is that this quirky van was born in the middle of the socialist era and somehow stayed in production all the way into the late 1990s. Today, we're going to look back at how that happened and why, even 50 years later, the Škoda 1203 is still worth talking about. By the mid-20th century, many manufacturers in the Eastern Bloc were starting to realize that the most practical layout for light commercial vehicles was the van-style cab-over design. It allowed for the most efficient use of space, whether for carrying passengers or cargo. Look at the era's classics: the Barkas from East Germany, Poland's Nisa and Juk, or the Soviet UAs and RAF vans. By the early 1970s, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance Comecon countries already had a good variety of microbuses in regular production. Škoda, for its part, had been building commercial versions of its 1201 and 1202 wagons since the late 1950s, vans and pickups mostly. But they weren't ideal. Payload capacity was limited, and passenger versions could only seat 5 people, including the driver. What socialist economies really needed was something in between, not as bulky as a full truck or bus, but still capable of hauling a decent load or several people at once. Importing such vehicles from the West was technically possible, but it required hard currency, which was in short supply. So the government issued a clear directive: design a light, spacious, and versatile commercial vehicle suitable for both cargo and passenger transport. The old backbone chassis platform wasn't up to the task anymore. It was too outdated. So Škoda went with a more modern solution: a fully integrated all-metal unibody with a van-style layout. To keep costs down and speed up development, the new vehicle would reuse as many existing components as possible. Development began in 1956. By September, the factory had already built 3 prototypes, designated Type 979. These early vans were powered by a 1.2-liter engine making 36 horsepower, mounted ahead of the front axle. A second batch came in March 1957, featuring more interior space and a cleaner exterior design. The third and final prototype of the series was built that July, with the engine now mounted above the front axle, improving handling and balance. The next prototype emerged in March 1958 and already closely resembled the final production model. Tests with earlier versions revealed that the 36 horsepower engine was too weak for such a large and spacious van. As a result, engineers swapped it for a more powerful 52 horsepower engine, developed for the Škoda 973 military vehicle. They also installed a torsion bar rear suspension sourced from the heavy-duty Tatra 805. At the same time, a separate project aimed to create lightweight utility vehicles for agricultural use. These machines shared some components with the 1203, but featured a radically different body: a simple open platform with a canvas roof, fold-down side panels, and removable doors and windshield frame. Essentially, a basic field transporter for moving harvested crops. This prototype was named the Škoda 998 Agromobile. Only a dozen or so units were built, and it never made it to mass production. By 1962, the concept and appearance of the vehicle had finally taken shape. The Škoda 1203 was officially born, offered as a minibus, an ambulance, and a light-duty flatbed truck. Despite early development efforts, the Škoda 1203 only entered mass production in late 1968, meaning the vehicle that the country urgently needed ended up missing almost the entire 1960s. Why? Launching a brand new vehicle required major factory retooling, reorganizing production lines, installing new stamping equipment, and reconfiguring the assembly line, all of which demanded substantial investment. At the same time, Škoda prioritized funding its new passenger car lineup. Besides, other ComCon countries like Poland and East Germany were already supplying vans to state enterprises. Still, after 12 years of development, the first production Škoda 1203 finally rolled off the line in the Czech town of Vršlaby. Even by Eastern Bloc standards, that was a long wait. Design-wise, the van had aged well. Clean, simple lines, without any overly trendy elements. The short, steeply raked hood and the upward-sloping rear end gave it a surprisingly dynamic look for a utility vehicle. Its 1.2-liter, 64-horsepower engine, shared with Škoda's passenger cars, allowed it to reach 95 kilometers per hour while carrying 8 passengers or up to 1 ton of cargo, with a curb weight of 1,170 kilograms. The first model built was a 2-seater cargo van, featuring a metal bulkhead separating the cabin from the rear. Later came an 8-passenger minibus, a 5-seater cargo passenger variant, a flatbed truck, ambulance, hearse, refrigerated van, and special versions for police, firefighters, and veterinary services. Once it entered mass production, the Škoda 1203 truly fulfilled the role of a multi-purpose vehicle. It wasn't known for its agility or refined driving dynamics, but it reliably carried out the tasks assigned to it by state enterprises, and even special services. However, the engineers were well aware that the years spent getting the vehicle to the production line had taken their toll. By the late 1960s, the design was already starting to show its age. That's why, at the beginning of the next decade, the factory began working on an updated version of the 1203. This resulted in the 1972 prototype van, the Škoda 778, which featured a more modern appearance, better visibility, and a more powerful 1.5-liter petrol engine. Unfortunately, like many other Škoda prototypes of that era, it never reached mass production. To increase output despite limited production capacity at the Vršlaby plant, Škoda began building the 1203 at another automotive factory, TAZ, in the Slovak town of Trnava, starting in 2007-1973. And since Škoda was actively updating its passenger car lineup in the early 1980s, production of the 1203 was fully transferred to the TAZ plant in 1981. Over the 13 years of production in 1981 Vršlaby, a total of 69,727 units of Škoda's only serially produced van were built. After Czechoslovakia ceased to exist and split into the independent states of the Czech Republic and Slovakia, production of the 1203 continued in Trnava, though now solely under the TAZ brand. The van was eventually fitted with a 5-speed gearbox, although the 1.4-liter engine still traced its design roots back to pre-war developments. There were attempts to modernize the exterior of the 1203, primarily through a new plastic front fascia. However, these minor updates only emphasized how outdated the vehicle had become overall. Ultimately, the 1203 family was laid to rest in 1999. This means that the minibus theme remained relevant for the Škoda brand for more than 40 years, nearly the entire second half of the 20th century. But the Škoda 1203 also had a truly unexpected, unusual version, the camper. Yes, a full-on motorhome, based on a van usually used by state enterprises and ambulance services. In the context of a planned socialist economy, it looked almost rebellious. Instead of hauling potatoes or medical equipment, this one was made for road trips and outdoor freedom. These camper versions started popping up in the 1970s. Most were custom builds, done either by hobbyists or small workshops. But a few were actually made at the factory. Estimates suggest between 300 and 500 units in total. That's practically nothing. Typically, it was a 1203 with a raised roof, foldable seats that turned into a bed, a small table, and even a mini kitchen. Add curtains on the windows, roof storage, and you've got yourself a tiny Eastern Bloc RV. And yes, it looked wildly out of place next to the gray concrete of the average socialist city. Today, these camper vans are extremely rare. The few original survivors with full camper equipment are true collector treasures. And let's be honest, seeing one parked beside a Soviet apartment block feels like a movie moment all on its own. In the 21st century, the Czech brand, now fully integrated into the Volkswagen Group, hasn't even hinted at creating a new minivan. And it's no surprise. Volkswagen itself has long locked down that market with the Transporter and Multivan series. There's simply no room left for Škoda to step in. However, in 2021, a Škoda designer named Daniel Hajek decided to dream a little. As part of the Icons Get a Makeover project, he presented his vision of what a modern-day Škoda 1203 could look like.